So today, our session's title is Beyond Income, Beyond Average, and Beyond Today, Redefining Human Development in the Anthropocene Era with People-Centered and Metrics and Hyperlocal Data. The title is a bit of a mouthful, but you get the full information about what we are going to speak today. The session has 3 speakers, all from the UNDP's Human Development Report Office. My name is Yanchen Zhang. I'm UNDP's chief statistician. My main job is to lead the production of human development indices. Joining me in the room is Admir Rahik. He's our production manager. We send the chapters, we send the statistical tables to him. He works with editors, developers to bring out beautiful reports and statistics and data, both in print and online. Also, from joining us online from New York, our home base is Heriberto Tapia. He's our head of research team, leading very, very exciting new and frontier research on various human development topics. The work we are presenting today has benefited, and continues to benefit from a large community of experts and researchers we have been collaborating with over the last 30 years. We only have one presentation. It has 4 different parts. So without further ado, I will go to the next slide. So I will give you a little bit background and context of human development statistics and data we are going to talk about today. But as I always like to remind the users of our statistics and data, measurement and concepts always go hand in hand. So our human development statistics and data don't exist on their own. They are integrated part of all these years' human development reports we have been writing and researching on. So the first report and first HDI were published in 1990. So far, we have been publishing almost 30 reports, and this 32-year of journey give us a lot of insights about what's important for human development. Now, our understanding of human development and our perspectives on how to best measure it has been evolving over time as well. I'd like to share with you the last 3 reports. We call them trilogy of HDR, Human Development Reports. In 2019, we wrote a report on inequality. Then in that report, we really go beyond income, beyond averages, and beyond today. Then we concluded, nowadays, when we tackle development challenges, when we research on development topics, or measure development progress, these 3 beyonds should be kept in mind. So it goes beyond the inequality report. In the following report, 2020, we started Anthropocene. So this is the geological era. First time human activity has a big impact on the environment. So my colleague Admir will present you more about the research we have been doing on this front. Then built upon these 2 reports, last year, we published the Human Development Report 21-22. Then this report, we talk about uncertain times, then how unsettled we have been feeling all over the world about the challenges we have been facing. Then in this report, we talk about the pressures, planetary pressures, elaborated in the 2020 report, and also the inequality challenges elaborated in the 19 report. Then these 2 imbalances, social imbalances and planetary imbalances, reinforce each other. So we see the shocks enlarge the inequalities. then the inequalities put more pressure on the planet. Then this will exhibit the risks and also exhibit the impacts of shocks. Then our metrics, statistics, and data out of the Human Development Report Office also evolve as we write on different topics. Then the latest Human Development Index, or indices family, has a member called PHDI, Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI. This is the new index we introduced in our 2020 Anthropocene report. Why we introduced this new index? Because over the years, we have been criticized by the simple structure of HDI and the short and the dimensions, some dimensions, a simple index like HDI does not take into account. So the problem, one problem associated with this shortcoming is that some high development countries, they use a lot of resources to achieve that high human development status. So high human development means high resource use and planetary imbalances in many cases. So HDI itself is not enough to guide sensible policies. So that's why we divide this new index, PHDI. Then this also a simple index. It's a discounted HDI. We use two indicators, two climate-related indicators to compute the discount factor. One is carbon dioxide emissions per person, then the other is material footprint per person. So we use these two indicators to compute the discount factor, then multiply by the original HDI score. So if your country's planetary pressure is 0, which means the adjustment, the discount factor is 1, then your PHDI and HDI identical. But we have no countries falling into that category. Instead, we have seen here. This graph shows you PHDI 2021. That's the latest PHDI index values we have calculated versus HDI 2021. Then the dotted line is the 45-degree line. Then you can see all the countries' PHDI values are below their HDI values, especially for those countries with very concentrated extractive industries, or some small open economies with a lot of cross-border traffic or economic transactions. And here, you can see as pressures appear, the PHDI will fall below the HDI. Only 7 countries, according to our 2022 report, remain with very high human development when pressures are considered, which means only 7 countries, their PHDI values is above 0.8. So we categorize countries into 4 groups. So those countries with 0.8 or higher will be placed in the very high human development category. Then 0.7 to 0.8 will fall into the high. Then 0.6 to 0.7 will fall into the medium. Then we have the low. So this PHDI was added to the existing 5 composite indices we have been regularly publishing. So very, very well-known one is the HDI, Human Development Index. It's a very simple index looking at only 3 dimensions. Then most of other composite indices we compute in the office also look at these 3 dimensions. The only exception is the GRI, Gender Inequality Index. Then GDI, Gender Development Index, is a simple ratio of female HDI over male HDI. Then for multidimensional poverty index, we jointly published with Oxford. Uh, it is a composite index looking at 3 dimensions, but using 10 indicators from the microsurvey data. Then for inequality adjusted HDI, the composition of this index is very similar to PHDI. It's an inequality adjustment factor times HDI. But to complement with these 6 composite indices, we also publish dashboards. So for the moment, we are producing 5 dashboards to provide complementary information on human development. Then some of you might be very familiar with HDI. It is our signature index, which has a history of 32 years. Simple composite index, 3 dimensions, 4 indicators. That's it. But behind this simple index, we have looked at the structure of the index, the methodological improvements over time. So there have been changes over time, but the basic structure and the number of indicators more or less remain the same for the last 3 decades. It is a multidimensional index. It is a capabilities index. For those of you who know HDI and HDR history, you know this is based on Amartya Sen's capabilities literature. So it's introduced to count for a basic set of capabilities. That's also one of the criticisms we have been receiving over the years, because now it's time to go beyond basic. We have to look at enhanced set of capabilities. But this HDI is still the most widely used composite index other than GDP to measure progress. Now, if we apply the 3 beyonds to our existing composite indices, we can see our HDI, Gender Inequality Index, and Multidimensional Poverty Index help us to understand how to measure progress beyond income. Then our Gender Development Index and Inequality Adjusted HDI help us to look beyond average. Then for the last one, Beyond Today, this latest addition to our Human Development Index family, PHDI, does the job. But we don't stop here. So today's presentation is more about looking forward. It's more about the next generation of HDR statistics and metrics. So my colleague will introduce the Human Climate Horizons project in a few minutes. So this is just a little peek. So it's a very exciting project we launched last year, but it's a live project. So we keep on updating, adding more analysis to it. Before I hand it over to Admir, I'd like to mention a little bit the impact of our work, the reports, and also the indices. So we are tracking the impact of our reports and indices in informing policymaking. So we found there are, in the last 3 years, there are more than 11,000 citations on our reports and also on our signature HDI. Now, every year, our website, hdr.undp.org, receives over 11 million page views and over 1 million digital knowledge product downloads every year from more than 240 countries and territories. And here, just a snapshot of how our latest report has been shown up in the journals, in the newspapers, and as an example, how our reports have been able to inform and shaping debates. So we have the examples from both within the organization, our country office use our research to design their country level program, but we also have a lot of other examples showing the impact. Then if you take HDI, for example, this index is constantly used by policymakers to measure the country's development progress, sometimes at the highest level. So the picture I'm showing you here is Niger. It's a Central African country. Then a couple of years ago, they set up a very high-level policy committee to look at the ways their country can improve their HDI value and rank. Then if you use Wikipedia, you will find HDI is one of the basic information they include for all the countries. And for the private sector, when they construct a sovereign fund or ESG fund, HDI is often used as the indicator to show how the social progress of the country has been made. What's next? Admir will present something we have been doing. Then I'm presenting 2 slides shows, something not ready yet, but we are actively researching and exploring. So according to Amartya Sen, if we talk about capabilities, there are 4 dimensions: options, achievements, well-being, and agency. So far, in terms of metrics, in terms of measurement, we were able to produce these 6-7 composite indices focusing on achievements and well-being. But going forward, we want to explore the other 3 boxes. In particular, these are the 3 questions we want to explore further related to human development related metrics. The first question, how to account for agency beyond well-being? So what is agency? It's a very difficult to explain concept. But in the capabilities literature, agency is about your ability to find what values for you, and you can make a commitment accordingly. That agency may or may not advance well-being. An example is you can quit your job, and you can skip school so that you can participate in climate-related protest or cause. So this is your agency. It may or may not advance your individual well-being. Then the second question, how to measure freedoms beyond achievements? So far, our metrics have been focusing on achievements, educational outcomes, health outcomes, standard of living. But these achievements do not necessarily reflect your options, your freedoms. You could fast, right? You could fast, then your nutritional outcome may not be as high as other individuals, but that's your freedom, that's your option. Then the last question we are asking ourselves, how to engage with inclusive wealth. So this is like a continuous research from our 2020 report of the Anthropocene. So we also welcome those of you who are interested in these questions to explore together with us. So now I'm handing over to Admir. He will give us a very detailed presentation on our Human Climate Horizon data platform.
Thank you, Anshun, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'll start with definition of word Anthropocene. I think everybody's more or less familiar. It's current geological era in which human activity has dominant influence on planet. And often that's connected with many negative impacts, but also we have to remember the human agency aspect of it. We still have power to turn things around. And here are some of those challenges. Like, as you can see, there are many. Impact on our health, impact on food production systems, impact on migration, labor productivity, energy use. Then there's impact on economies, all of these combined. But when we look at these impacts, it's important to understand the overlapping and interacting nature of these layers. We can look at them individually, but when they interact, and they do in many parts of the world, they create vicious cycles. So for that, addressing these challenges, we need to require coordinated action, not only at global level, but at all levels. It needs, as Yinchun mentioned, data that goes beyond averages, beyond income, and beyond today. So that sounds like a catchy phrase, but there's a lot of research and meaning behind it. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. So when you say beyond income, we say that we need people-centered metrics in Anthropocene that will measure impact on our health, impact on our lives, impact on our communities. Beyond averages, we need to provide highly disaggregated measures while continuing advancement in in composite indices. And then beyond today, we need to really provide short, medium, and long-term estimates of those impacts on people over the entire century under different policy scenarios. And then we land on Human Climate Horizons platform and data project. This is partnership product between UNDP, Human Development Report Office, and Climate Impact Lab. It is comprehensive, peer-reviewed data, provides projected impacts of climate change over the entire 21st century for 2 policy scenarios, and it covers over 24,000 regions worldwide, so it's highly disaggregated. Most importantly, this project is open to everyone as a digital public good. So when you look at Human Climate Horizon, we like to say it's a really powerful tool to identify where people are most at risks and which impacts they may face over the century. And allows people to compare impacts at country level, between countries, to inform decision-making and highlight where local and collective responses are most needed. It can also illustrate how impact of our present choices can shape human development over the entire century. And here I'll play a short video clip just to highlight some features of this platform.
In the Anthropocene, we know we've got a narrowing window in which we need to take urgent action. To help us make better choices about the future we want, we're going to provide trustworthy information and data about the human impacts of climate change as an open public good. Human Climate Horizons is a data insights platform built upon peer-reviewed frontier scientific information. It enables all of us to see both the global and hyperlocal projections of human impacts of climate change, including 24,000 regions worldwide. As data shows, everyone will be affected by climate change, but not in the same way or intensity. The platform highlights the effects of climate change on mortality, energy consumption, and labor. Over 3 time horizons symbolizing generations across the 21st century, and 2 emission scenarios that underscore our collective policy choices. It also shows how these impacts compare between regions, bringing into focus where some of us are most at risk and where local and collective responses are most needed. For example, the projected growing inequalities in levels of mortality. But people's futures are not predetermined. UNDP is working with the Climate Impact Lab, a unique collaboration between the United Nations entity exploring the frontiers of human development and a consortium of leading climate scientists, economists, computational experts, researchers, and analysts from leading research institutions. Human Climate Horizons will be a living platform that continues to expand to cover more human development indicators, with data coming soon on disruption to food production and damage to infrastructure. The platform's mission is to ensure equal access to climate data connected to human development indicators, so everyone can play a role in choosing local and shared paths forward.
Okay, continuing. So it's important to point, so after this video, that in this current release of data platform that we launched in November 2022, we include 4 indicators. On hazards, we have temperature change, which provides information on days below 35 centigrade and days below 0. And then also we provide 4 impact indicators on mortality, which is measured in additional deaths on 100,000 population due to climate change compared to future if there was no global warming. indicator on energy demand, which is mean projected per capita change in electricity or other fuel use, and then also impact on labor productivity, which is mean projected change in time spent working due to climate change, expressed in number of hours lost per each worker per year. Now, this year, we plan to release additional indicators. In September, we're launching indicator on coastal changes, so sea level changes. We're also going to include indicator on agriculture, which is impact on food production, and then also indicator on damage to infrastructure. And then in pipeline, there's also work on migration. As you can see, it takes several years to produce all these indicators because they are peer-reviewed in some of the leading socioeconomic journals. And this is just a basic explanation of data processing workflow. So scientists work with terabytes of historic data. They analyze the data from weather, social, economic sources. Then they look for empirical evidence using big data analytics, how some of these climatic conditions impacted people over time. And then finally, they use these historic estimates to quantify the cost of past changes in climate and then simulate over the entire century how are these changes set to grow over time, of course, with adjustments for projected growth income, population, future greenhouse emissions, and others. And this is one specific example. So now what we see here, if we look at country of Bangladesh, if we zoom in on city of Dhaka, so we can, I mean, it would be better if you could actually demonstrate it here, but if you zoom in on city of Dhaka, under high emission scenario, looking at end of century, what we find here, that city of Dhaka is going to experience 132 additional deaths per 100,000 population. Now, that's significant. Comparing to today's data, that's double Bangladesh death rate from all cancers combined, and that's 9 times greater than rate of all road traffic fatalities. So this shows the power of this platform, and not only to present data, but to communicate on these important issues. Now, this is additional mortality impact example. Again, now we zooming out and looking at entire country. And here is country of Iran. Also emission scenario 8.5. And we're looking at the mid-century time horizon. What we see in Iran, that Iran is going to experience 21 additional deaths per 100,000 people on average. But the key story here is, if you look at these dark orange, almost red areas, and these faded purple, what this shows, what this indicates, that these dark orange areas, in those areas, people are probably over 100 or 200 additional deaths going to happen. And if these faded purple areas, there may be no change or actually decrease. So this underscores importance of taking hyperlocal approach to evaluate situation and then have targeted solution to effectively mitigate impacts of climate change. And this is another example. Here we're looking at energy impact. This is a good example for cross-country comparison. Here, what we see in electricity use, for instance, countries like Singapore and India are going to have significant increase in electricity use to mitigate and cope with situation and global warming, while countries like Canada may experience decrease in use of other fuels, which include oil, natural gas, and others. And this is final slide on these examples. So here we're looking at labor productivity. And what happens, of course, as temperature rise, workers lose ability to work, especially in high-risk sectors like agriculture, like construction, working in mining. And what we see here, India is projected to witness 118 days each year with temperatures surpassing 35 centigrade Celsius or 95 Fahrenheit. Now, if you convert that into labor productivity, India is expected to lose approximately 20 hours per worker each year. Now, we can easily see that's almost half a week of loss per worker, and that can significantly impact GDP. Countries like Sudan, for instance, they're going to have even more significant impacts. So when we look at all of these indicators, as I mentioned, it's important to have this multidimensional view to understand that while some parts of the country may benefit from climate change, overall, we are all at loss and everyone's going to be impacted We just don't know exactly how, but in different ways for sure. With that, I will turn over to my colleague Heriberto, who's joining us today from New York. Heriberto, over to you. You can hear me.
Thank you so much, Admir. Thank you, Janshun. So I'm gonna talk about three examples about how we can use this new generation of data to decide policies. Um, and in these three examples, two are related with this idea of having the possibility of exploring hyperlocal data, but at the same time with a global perspective. And one example that is going to be more uh, about capturing things that we cannot see, which is the case of agency. So this is a first example based on the platform that Admir just presented, Human Climate Horizons. And one very powerful finding from this data is the additional effect that this will have, the climate change will have on inequality. The world is already very unequal, but climate change can become truly an inequality bomb. So this picture shows what are the effects of climate change on mortality. This is the additional effect, and you could see how from the baseline the effect grows over time in the next few decades, in the mid-century, and towards the end of the century. And uh, and not only that, you see that some countries in orange will experience what most of us will expect, an increase in mortality, but also we have several countries in blue which might expect a decrease in their mortality. And these are the areas that will, in a way, benefit from some global warming. So this is something that is going to affect the dynamics of country, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. The next slide, please, Smir. Uh, Now, if we want to see what is the distribution of these effects, in the next slide, we can see that there are clear patterns. Uh, Here you can see the regions. So, interestingly, developed countries, that are the countries that historically have caused most of the emissions, are, based on this indicator, this is just one indicator, effect of changes in the temperature or mortality, will experience a decrease on average. Sorry, yes, a decrease in mortality on average. While some other regions like Arab state, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa will experience a very high increase in mortality. So precisely those areas that tend to be poorer today will face even more challenges tomorrow. So this is going to be very important for policymaking. First, to trigger action, we can do things today in order to avoid this. But second, because we know that even if we act and we have moderate mitigation, and this is another message of the platform, there would be still significant inequalities coming from climate change. So we need to prepare mitigation, adaptation. So we know that even if there is moderate mitigation, around 40 million people are expected to die. This platform gives us the information where these people are expected to live. And certainly this is something that can inform the loss and damage policy making. Second example of how we can use the new generation of data. This is another project where we want to localize human development in order to support the leaving no one behind agenda. So it's very important to know where the poorer people are. But we have a problem that precisely in the context where people are poorer, are facing more problems, we have the worst data. So the challenge here is how we can produce information that can give us indication where the poorest people live using a methodology that's transparent and standard. And well, satellite data can give us that. There are plenty of satellites, more than 700. They are collecting data constantly. tons and tons of data, terabytes. And something very important is that this data is by construction comparable in the way it is captured. So based on this, we have partnered with colleagues from different universities, mainly UC Berkeley, to generate, for the first time, very hyperlocal estimate of human development. So in the next slide, you can see how what we produce right now, the Human Development Index, the signature indicator explained by Yan Shun, we produce it for every country, 191 country. But we can use this methodology of satellite data and also some machine learning to generate estimates for provinces, 1,765 units, for municipalities, over 61,000 units, and also for hyperlocal grid of more than 800,000 units. So in the next slide, you have a picture of these hyperlocal estimates that can really give us a good sense of what are the areas that are less developed. In this case, the ones that are with a more intense blue are the ones with lower levels of human development. So this is something that could be really used to localize policy making, and it will help us or will help different policymakers to meet to implement a new generation of policies. And also, as Admir was pointing out, uh, all these estimates can be overlaid. So now we can see where the effects of climate change are going to be stronger, comparing also with the underlying conditions of human development. Then the final example, this is more a reflection about what is the next frontier, what Yanchun was mentioning. The next frontier for us is also trying to understand the problems related to the lack of agency of people, because we have some sort of paradox. Because over the last few years, even before COVID, we would see that things would be improving around the world in terms of traditional indicators. However, people were not feeling well. We observe rising levels of human insecurity. 6 out of 7 people were feeling insecure. Levels of insecurity were increasing even in developed countries. Also, people were feeling more anxious and stressed. The percentage of people reporting stress increased more than 10% over 10 percentage point over the last decade. So what's going on? We think this has to do with the fact that there are some blind spots, things that we are not capturing and that are related to lack of agency. So in a way, people have more power in the nominally they can do more things, but they cannot control this power. So the current challenge for us is how to track agency, how to measure agency. And the next Human Development Report will try to measure uh, positive agency in terms of, in particular, collective agency. But we are already measuring some indicators related to negative agency, so some barriers to agency. And some of these could be related to human insecurity, but also gender social norms. So this is to announce that in the next few weeks, in the next month, we are going to release a new publication that is going to report the situation of gender social norms in most countries in the world. It's representative of 85% of the global population, and the findings are very sad in a way, because 90% of the people in the world have serious biases against women. I'm going to stop here, and I will be happy to take a few questions. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Admir and Harry. We are right on time. We still have 20 minutes left for Q&A. So we are opening the floor to all of you here, but we also open the questions to our online participants. We have colleagues from our home base, New York, to monitor the online questions. But if any of you have any questions about our reports or indices, yeah, let us know. We have 20 minutes left. You can see probably different from quite a few sessions you have been to. This is a very focused session presented from a very focused group of colleagues. But that's what we do, UNDP Human Development Report Office. Then what we present today is a teeny tiny bit of what we do. We do original research. We do original statistics. So please check our website, hdr.undp.org.
Thank you. Um, Hi, everyone. Mark Peterson from San Francisco, California. First of all, this work is an extraordinary contribution. So thank you to you who are here and to UNDP for this work. Um, One of the goals mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation was empowering individuals through this data, and we spoke a fair bit about agency as well. When I think about how people, for example, in San Francisco, might organize grassroots pressure to persuade their leaders within the city to take action, it requires being familiar with the data that's out there. I think this is a platform that a lot of people, say in San Francisco, may not be familiar with, whereas there are leaders in the city who are very familiar, for example, with the San Francisco data portal and you know, probably in many other cities, similar localized data sets and data portals. I'm just curious if there are any mechanisms for getting this data into more familiar platforms for people to be able to see sort of the local view of what this data means in places that they're more familiar with.
Definitely. Maybe Admir can add, but I can start. So our HDI, Harry provided details. Currently, we calculate HDI at the country level for 191 countries and territories. But we do have a very large group of researchers collaborating with the office. For example, they developed subnational HDI. Then our research team is currently working with UC Berkeley, trying to also produce very, very hyper local HDI. But how to link all these products to a more user-friendly and user-familiar platforms, we are currently also brainstorming. Then we have also our UNDP other teams working together. Then one way is to come to gatherings like this. Then the other, we do think education is the key within our own organizations beyond even people like in Francisco already very well educated and informed. They may not know this work at all, right? Maybe we could also work with UC Berkeley, pushing a little bit the impact of California. So I will let Admir to add.
Yeah, thank you, Anshul. I mean, you covered most of it. Mark, thanks for the question. I mean, that's a great question. Mark and I discussed this a little bit yesterday as well. Yeah, so part of our outreach strategy when we launched the platform itself was really focused on that, right? Whenever you launch a new product like this, digital product, we think, oh, everybody's gonna like it because we put so much work into it, so much effort, this is great data, but that's not reality. There's so many competing platforms, there's so much competing information in this day and age. So how we communicate it is very important, but also how we do outreach. So what we did in that initial phase was we focused on media outreach. We reached out to several newspapers. We did some work with them so that information gets published. But then that was also picked up by many other media agencies all around the world. So for instance, the findings from Human Climate Horizons was published in Financial Times. We had worked with Washington Post as well. We worked with PBS on documentary on climate change. Many local local newspapers in many countries, as well as niche magazines, for instance, on data visualizations, on design, picked up this work. That was the first phase of our outreach. Now, this year, what we're trying to do is we also want to leverage UNDP's presence in over 170 countries, and we want to engage directly policymakers and people to see application examples of this work. And then again, work with local media just to show, to basically, the key is to put this information in hands of people, right? And I think that that's probably the best way, right? Once people are aware of it, then may start using it, and they may start understanding how this information, like what's published on Human Climate Horizons, impacts them, and then may take action. Because often we talk about climate change, we talk about a change in degrees 1.5 or 2 degrees, but really when you show how many additional people are going to die in my community, I may get concerned. So that's part of the plan. But again, of course, I think part of outreach is very important to identify um, these other platforms that exist and then share data and collaborate. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Ed Morrow, Lloyds Register Foundation. Just to echo, this is all really fantastic, really interesting work, and I especially love the way that you're thinking about metrics that really kind of consider human beings as human beings and what they need to thrive rather than just sort of units of production. But I just wanted to ask specifically on the Human Climate Horizons platform. Obviously, each of those metrics, the loss of hours and so on, take a huge amount of work to calculate. So I'm just wondering how you went about choosing and prioritizing those metrics, and if there were other things potentially that you considered that may come in future or that sort of didn't make the cut, and why that was.
Thanks so much. And that's also a great question, a question that we got a lot during this conference. And I think Heriberto can also pitch in here from research perspective. As mentioned, we work with Climate Impact Lab on this, which is a consortium of several U.S. universities, with University of Berkeley, Rutgers, University of Illinois, and they already have this research in pipeline. They're part of IPCC, so some priorities that come out in IPCC reports over time are actually measured to use to start working on some of this research, and then put these indicators out there. For us, like I said, migration is going to be a big one. It's going to take about 1 to 2 years, but that is really going to show not only impact on countries that are facing climate change, but also impact on countries that have to deal with this influx of climate migrants. But again, part of our research this year and part of collaboration and partnership call is to collaborate with everyone, right? To start these discussions and then see which other layers we may want to add. For instance, yesterday I had, actually day before yesterday, I had a very good conversation with the representative of UNDP from Kenya, and he was convincing me to how important rainforest loss is in Africa, and he was very passionate about that subject. And yeah, so every part of the world is experiencing different impacts that really impact local communities. And I think, as mentioned in the video that you saw, this is open platform. It's a living platform, and we look to add more indicators as we go to really show these multidimensional impacts. Heriberto, from research side, if you have any additional comments, please.
Thank you, Admir. I think you explained it well. Like in all indicators, there is a mix between of on the one hand the need to measure certain things and what can be measured. So I think these are the two elements that are driving this agenda, because we are just on the one hand discovering the effects of climate change. So these allow us to picture certain things that we would like to measure, but on the other hand, not in every space there is the methodological clarity to be able to measure this. And so in that sense, the layers that we have there are the result of the ones where the two things have aligned. So we have a clear understanding of what we want to measure, and we have the data. For the case of migration, we have a situation where it's very clear that we want to measure that. However, it's much more complex, and why it's taking more time. So it's this mix, and this is common to many of the indicators that we typically work on. Over.
Then again, these are our original work. These are peer review data. So when we work on new areas, it takes longer time. But we know supply demand goes both ways. Supply creates demand, but demand like Kenya on rainforest loss may create supply of such data down the road. We are tracking these demands, but it depends on the data availability and the progress we are currently making with our partners. Any other questions? Do we have any questions online? Bryce?
Um, I have a question.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have one question online.
Uh, so I'm a little late. I'm so sorry. I have do some research about HDI when I'm a student, and now I'm wondered about the data and the definition about HDI because I think with the different data sources today, so is it means that with the different sources or different ways to gathering the data and concept of HDI will change or still remain unchanged? So that means for the three part, the education, the health, and also the living standard, shall we do some changes for these three aspects? So that's the first. And the second is about standard, because we have classified into different standard. And I noticed that using the machine learning, such things. So even if we use the ways, something like this, shall we, change the classification about the three part, or just because of the new machine learning techniques, or just still with unchanged with the old standard? So that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I understand your question correctly, the first question is about now with the more available sources data, will we consider using those alternative sources?
We will consider to to change the meaning of HDI or change the way to define this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So it's a very good question. That's something we are also constantly debating ourselves. But the index is not only an index. That's why I present the first slide.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
reports really provide theoretical foundation of our index. Then any change to the structure of the index, whether 3 dimensions or 5 dimensions or 7 dimensions, because nowadays with the availability of data improving, you see some composite index with dozens of dimensions and hundreds of indicators, right? We have complex composite index like that. But so far, our HDI has been stay more or less the same. 3 dimensions, 4 indicators. Then regards the sources of data, we only use the data from UN or other international organizations who are the custody agencies of these indicators. For example, for health dimension, we only include one indicator, which is life expectancy at birth. We source this data from UN Population Division. Then for 2 education indicators, we source data from UNESCO. Then for standard of living, we use the GNI per capita, gross national income per capita, which was sourced from IMF World Bank and also UNDESA. So we only use these international organizations as our official source. Then we don't take national data directly. Then we don't use unofficial data so far because the credibility we want to maintain. It's very, very important to maintain the credibility of your statistical product. Then back to what Admir commented before, the value of your report or the value of your stats or data really, really comes from your user, your users' feedback, right? So if people don't use your report or don't use your stats, what's the point? Then for our HDI, for example, we receive emails, calls almost on a daily basis from different countries. Please explain. Please send us the source of data. Please compare. So I think these are the very, very encouraging feedback that have motivate us keep on improving the HDI. But when you change the structure, when you change the indicator, when you change the sources of data, the consequence could be negative, could hurt your credibility. So that's why we have been approaching this very, very carefully. It's not like we are not doing any changes. The internal debate and consultations with different stakeholders, with experts are ongoing. We have our own statistical advisory panel, which is composed of chief statisticians from many organizations, but also leading measurement experts from universities, from research institutes. We consult with them on an ongoing basis. We have face-to-face meeting every year. So we check these questions. Shall we add more dimensions? Shall we use unofficial sources? Then very last meeting was taking place last December in Geneva. Then one of the panel members did. She keep on pushing us, why not using some unofficial source of data? So it's not a straightforward question. Again, to some, it's related to the conceptual evolution of human development. As Ed said, everything is about human. Then we are Human Development Report Office, so everything we do is about human development. In terms of research, in terms of stats work, then it's really based on this capabilities approach. It's very thoroughly researched, but it's also constantly evolving. Now we have even association on human capabilities. Then this association provides a lot of intellectual backup to our work and also push us to explore different topics and measurement issues in our reports and in our projects.
I'm Ayash from Morocco. Thank you for this really wonderful platform with great data, and which also, for me, that shows of the impact of the change of climate change. And from the scenario that we've seen is that more the developed countries who are going to benefit from the climate change. So this is for me that the question for me is just to go a little bit beyond the measurements and try to it's like and this one I'm like talking to the UNDP. So who should take more actions, the developed countries or the developing countries? So and this is the question. So because it's like the developed countries who were the source of the climate change, if we can say so, and problem that they're gonna be the beneficiary from the climate change. So and also when we talk about the problem of migration, so the migration also is the problem caused by the developed countries and benefiting also from the climate change. So and that's the question. So which means that for me, who is gonna take more actions? So it's like we shouldn't be asking developing countries to take more actions, and the problem is that they want to catch up. They want to, because when measuring the Human Development Index, because we see that we need that countries from the developing countries to alleviate their level of well-being. So, thank you.
Excellent question. Maybe also the last question we can take today. I just saw the 1 minute reminder to me. Actually, in our next report, we're going to write about collective action. So the simple answer to your question, we all have to act, both developing countries and developed countries, but not only the countries, communities, individuals, starting from very small things you can do on a daily basis. We will dig deeper in our Human Development Report 2023. We'll continue our research on unsettled lists and insecurity, polarization. Then we will go to the next stage where to find the solution to these challenges. Then we want to emphasize collective action. Then, in addition, our office is a research office, but UNDP is a big organization with policy bureau. We have a big policy bureau who does policy related work. So often, for example, our research transfer to policy bureau. Policy bureau colleagues transform them to very country specific or even area specific policy advice. Climate change, we have big team, actually big teams working on supporting individual countries. But again, on this, I think a little bit demand-driven will be very, very helpful. Countries approaching us for your specific challenges, then we can work together trying to find the solutions. Harry, do you have anything to add from your end? Oh, sorry.
No, Yanchun, I think you answered very well. I think, but I really appreciate the question, and I think this is what we want: is to put the data out there with some novel insights, so that can unveil things that now are not obvious. And I think this is the journey that we are starting with some of these data, and I think we will continue to receive those questions. So if you have more of those, please reach out, because I think we need to keep the conversation going. Over.
Thank you, Harry. Yes, and on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time. We had some questions online. We'll say to all these people who has these questions all around the world, we'll respond to those questions in writing. So thank you, everyone, for participating. Over to you, Lianchun, for any final remarks. Thank you.
Just want to thank everyone here to support our event, but also, I think it's a learning event, not only for you, but also for us, because the questions we received, the feedback we got, will help our future work. This office of 30 economists, statisticians, then we work on human development centric topics. So if you have any interest in our work, please reach out. The website, all what we present are available on our website. Then all our data are downloadable from our website. All our public information. Then if you have further detailed questions, then you can reach out to us. Then for the indices, all our methodology notes and references are available online as well. So thank you so much. I also want to thank Harry for your participation at such a late time from New York. And also our colleagues Bryce and Zhao Xi, who supported us from New York. Thank you. Then see you next week in New York.